This is Dan McCarthy, and you're listening to Check In by TMR. So, earlier this month, a bunch of similar news articles started trending on social media, all coming from this one report by the International Panel on Climate Change. The report put together a number of maps based on some of the most reliable climate change data out there. Maps that projected what parts of the world could possibly find themselves underwater due to rising sea levels as early as 2030. Which is just about 8 years from where we are today. Iconic cities like Amsterdam, New Orleans, Venice, Bangkok, and Savannah, cities that have been victims of flooding in the past, could all see a devastating impact, according to this report. If the data from the report holds true, we could be talking about those cities and others in the past tense at some point very soon, talking about what they used to be like, telling a younger generation how incredible things used to be there. The travel industry can exist online or in virtual reality. That's something that became so incredibly painfully obvious during the pandemic. Places very much need to exist. Real life places full of people, full of personalities, full of tangible things that people can touch and see and taste. Things that have made the industry so attractive and traveling such a passion for so many people. I think that's what makes the situation the industry is in right now so incredibly concerning. Because at the same time the industry is finally turning back on post-COVID, the climate reality is coming back with it. The drop in carbon emissions from the COVID-19 pandemic, which was measurable, is essentially gone now. And the time to start scaling up climate action within the tourism world is now. Research and reporting from the UN WTO showed that there is a growing consensus amongst stakeholders within the travel industry that the industry as a whole needs to cut its carbon emissions by half by 2030. That the industry, which is forecasted right now to increase its carbon emission by 25% in that year, and pre-pandemic accounted for 8% of the world's total greenhouse gas emission, which is a higher percentage than the construction industry, needs to start scaling up now before it's too late. That responsibility is going to fall to essentially everyone that travel touches, from CEOs to travel advisors to tourism boards to consumers. It's undoubtedly the most profound risk that the travel industry faces, many times larger than a new COVID variant or an economic downturn. Some companies are already taking that risk extremely seriously, including the Travel Corporation and its brands. Guy Young, a 20-year veteran of TTC and the current president for its Inside Vacations and Luxury Gold brands, is my guest for this episode. Young is part of a TTC team that is tops among companies recognizing the need for sustainable tourism. That company is pledged to be carbon neutral by 2030 or sooner, and to source 50% of all electricity from renewable sources by 2025. It's pledges like that's been at the bedrock of TTC's operations for more than a decade. In this conversation, we touch on that pledge and the dedication the TTC has to this kind of initiatives. We also talk about Young's path into tourism, from growing up in South Africa to working at a Days Inn in California to now heading up Insight and Luxury Gold. At the end of the conversation, he gives his advice to those who are younger in their career or just getting into the travel industry. And it's advice that I think everyone should hear regardless of where you stand in your career or where you are at in the world. It's a conversation that I really enjoyed, and I hope you do too. Let's check in with Guy.
Hey Dan, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. How's are you in New York? I knew you were in New York, the New York area, pre-pandemic. Are you still around?
I am still around. Yeah, we've had a hell of a time because we bought a new home. It was hell of a hard. We've been trying for like a couple of years, but you know, with the pandemic, the suburbs have become so popular.
Yeah.
And so we end up signing our papers on September 1st. As we were signing on the dotted line, it started raining, and it never stopped. And that was when we had the remnants of Hurricane Ida.
Yeah.
So my rental, the basement flooded. My new home, the basement flooded.
Oh
It's
my
just been a
God.
disaster. Yeah. How have you fared?
Yeah, I'm in Brooklyn, so we had flooding. Like, I mean, my little neighborhood was okay, to be honest, but I mean, not too far from us. It was bad. I mean, I saw the videos and photos of just cars just being absolutely covered in water. I couldn't believe it, really. I don't know. I don't know if these things are going to keep happening more often, but it was scary.
I think it is going to happen more often. And of course, I don't have flood insurance, so I'm kind of screwed. But I think I'm going to get flood insurance. So I do think it's going to happen more often. But it was crazy because in our rental, we hadn't moved into a home, but in our rental, we were on like a brook. I mean, you couldn't believe there's a bridge, probably the structure is probably 4 feet above ground level. You couldn't see the bridge. I mean, it was
Oh my
just covered
God.
in water. And we were lucky because our home was a little bit elevated, but other people on the street, I mean, it wasn't just the basement, it was the first floor. They're throwing out fridges and stoves. I mean, it was just terrible.
Oh my God.
Really sad. But anyway, beyond that, everything's good. No, we're good. The family's good. My kids are good. So all's well. And it sounds like you fared pretty nicely through the pandemic. I know you're keeping busy and doing lots of great interviews. So
Yeah.
sounds like if things have gone okay for you, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, I knew there was a lot of pessimism. I think for everyone, like those first few months, and then it just became like a waiting game almost. Like, when is the actual ability to travel going to return? Because demand was always there. Even like after a month or so, I'm sure consumers were really ready to travel. But it was just the reality of it. When could you actually travel? So it seems like the momentum for the whole industry is sort of continuing now. And then I know this is November 5th right now, so in a few days, the international borders in the US will open, and hopefully that'll be another sort of boost of optimism. Things are feeling pretty good, I think. The momentum sort of carrying through, and hopefully the holiday season is good for everybody.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, yeah, we it's the best way to describe it has been a total roller coaster. We were seeing some really good booking momentum in June. In fact, we were really close to our 2018, 2019 sort of pre-pandemic levels. And then with the Delta variant, things just crashed again. And now we've started to see a rebirth in bookings sort of mid-September. And then certainly, October was a decent month for us. But
Yeah.
we're still not quite at our pre-pandemic levels now. But I think we'll get there. I think people just need to feel confident they can travel, that the restrictions aren't going to be too arduous, and I think we'll see a real resurgence in bookings. We're hoping in the first quarter of next year.
Yeah,
Is
I
when.
wanted to mention I don't think I've spoken to you since you took on the new position.
Oh, right, yeah.
So yeah, so I want to say congratulations on that too. I know
Thank
you've been with the TTC for a long time, and I know you were at Uniworld for a little while. What was your feeling taking on this new position? What was the sort of decision going into that?
Yeah, no, great, thanks. Yeah, no, it's been exciting. So basically, Insight and Luxury Gold, we feel have huge potential in the marketplace. And so when I was approached mainly by Brett, to take on the role for Insight in the US and Luxury Gold, I was actually quite excited because I think there's huge potential. Insight sits in its own category as the only premium guided sort of tour operator. And so I don't think we've really communicated that enough. And I think there's a lot of potential in that kind of premium sector of the guidification market. And then on Luxury Gold, it's super exciting because we've done a total not only rebrand, but we've changed the product dramatically, including capping the passenger count at 24 passengers, whereas previously it was 40. So we'll operate probably with around 20, but never more than 24.
Okay.
So I just think we've made a lot of great substantive changes on Luxury Gold. And I think there's huge opportunity at the upper end of the market. And certainly for Insight and Luxury Gold, I guess it's true for all of the TTC brands, but certainly for some reason, Insight gets a disproportionate amount of support historically from the Australian market, more so than some of the other guided brands. They've just got really good brand presence there. And given that the US, well, up until very recently, was the only market that was really seeing any sort of sales momentum, there was a lot of focus and expectations from the US market, which is great. So I think there's a lot of challenges and opportunities. So I'm very excited to be part of the Insight and Luxury Gold team. And there's a great team. It's two great brands. So it's all very exciting.
Yeah, you mentioned capping the passenger numbers, and was that a result of the pandemic, or is that a result of the team just wanting to change things with the brand and create a little more intimate experience?
Yeah, so that discussion was well underway
Yeah.
before the pandemic because the feedback we'd heard from the market is that as we're positioning Luxury Gold at the very top end of the guidification market, certainly there were some agents that were making the case it's too big a group size to really be considered luxury. We did have some smaller group sizes on more of the kind of exotic destinations. And so it was certainly something that was underway pre-pandemic, but obviously the timing turned out to be very fortuitous because everyone is looking to have smaller group size. And we did, now even on Insight, we have small group departures. We have private departures where it can be as low as 12 people. So certainly there was a move towards smaller groups. But again, that discussion was well underway pre-pandemic for luxury gold, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like that every segment, not just tours, is just trying to create this more intimate experience, regardless of. I know it was a thing with the pandemic. People, the thought was let's get smaller group sizes because that seems to be a little more safe health wise. But I think it's just people want that more intimate experiences. Even the large cruise ships, I know they're trying to create smaller intimate experiences within that bigger experience too.
Yeah.
That seems to be a big way the industry is trending in general is creating this more intimate, smaller group type experience.
No, totally. And just because you mentioned, I always find it quite amusing that sometimes people or agents have an aversion to a tour group of 40 people,
Yeah.
and yet they sell cruises all day long where, even on the luxury side, it's 200 plus people, but it's up to 5,000 on the contemporary brand. So, I would argue that from the outset, it is still a small group. But we understand the perception, and certainly I will say that even our traditional group size on Insight. So with Insight we have group size up to 40, then we have the small groups 24, and then we have what we've created during the pandemic. We're offering small private groups where you could take a brochure group and do it with as few as 12 people. There's obviously an additional cost for that, but you can do it as small as 12 people. But our traditional group size are still selling very well. And I think one of the reasons why that is one thing we've done, this is for the TTC open age guided brands,
Okay.
is we've added on our groups a wellbeing director in addition to a travel director. And I think that's given our guests a huge amount of peace of mind. And having operated a number of the groups recently, having that person on the coach just takes a lot of the tension or the apprehensive out of the trip, but also during the booking cycle, I think people feel a lot more confident. Okay, there's a travel director and there's also a wellbeing director. I think that's really helped our sales, certainly for the TTC open age guided brands.
I know we're very still much in this pandemic, and I know like I mean, do you or your team have expectations of when sort of the COVID worries are going to start sliding away, or do you think it's going to be a slow thing as we continue to sort of move into this year and into 2022 too?
Yeah, that's a great and I think a very hard question
Yeah.
to answer. I mean, well, when it first happened, we thought it was going to be a couple of months, and now it's dragged on for close to 2 years. And certainly in June, we thought the worst was over, and then we had the Delta variant. So I'm very, very cautious in terms
Yeah.
of giving a firm guideline. But certainly with the advancements of vaccinations, even just the number of infections in the communities, I mean, I think there is the expectation that come the new year, we're going to start seeing a real uptick in business. And I think people are just going to have to learn to live with it. I think what's very important is that people do get vaccinated. It's not a political view, it's very much a practical view, because it is becoming very difficult to travel if you're not vaccinated. It's so much easier to travel if you're vaccinated. In fact, I think but we are now requiring people to be vaccinated for all departures through 2022. And again, it was just a simple reality on the ground, is that if you're not vaccinated, you have to get tested to go into sites and museums, and it's just not practical to do that. It's very expensive. So I think as long as you're vaccinated, we do believe that that travel is going to start coming back. And so we have high expectations for 2022. Certainly our forward sales are very strong, and we are now seeing increased booking momentum. So I expect 2022 to be a strong recovery year. So hopefully 2022 is the year that we turn it around.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, I'm sure you see the consumer headlines all the time about these vaccination requirements outside of travel, and there's so much controversy and pushback and all these. But I don't know. From my feeling is within the industry, it seems less so. It seems more of an acceptance in travel in general. Maybe that's because how bad things were for the industry in the beginning of the pandemic, or maybe it's because the people who are in travel kind of understand what you mentioned, the practicality of being vaccinated versus being tested seemingly every other day if you're trying to travel through Europe.
No, no, absolutely. And I think the thing is, when you look at travel in isolation, I mean, when we came out with our vaccination policy, obviously we were concerned that maybe some clients weren't vaccinated, we're going to lose a lot of bookings. But what we found is that And we knew this because even for the trips we were operating, the guests need to declare whether or not they were vaccinated. And actually, the vast majority of guests that are traveling with us are already vaccinated. So we were really talking to the vast majority of people, number one. But number two, the other interesting thing, and this wasn't the reason why we went to required vaccinations. It wasn't from a sales and marketing standpoint we're doing it. It was more from a health and safety and operational standpoint that we're requiring vaccinations. But what was very interesting is that it actually did help on the sales side too, because so many people that are traveling now are people that are vaccinated. And when they're traveling, they want to know that their fellow travelers are also vaccinated. So it actually did give more confidence to make a booking to travel. So all around, it's been a very, very good decision. And certainly, I think the cruise lines make this argument. We would certainly make this argument. When you're traveling on a tour, all of the people you're traveling with are vaccinated, so you've got that very good. You're kind of like in your own bubble. Yeah. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, with the wellbeing director, I think there's a lot more confidence and peace of mind traveling with our brands today than there were before we implemented the policy.
Yeah. So you took a position. Was it April? Did I have that right? It was April.
April, correct.
And before then, you worked as sort of your title was engagement officer at TTC, right?
Correct. Yeah.
I think you've spent almost your whole career working for those that company.
Correct. Yeah, I pretty much spent my entire career with the Travel Corporation. So, just to give you a kind of a brief background on my sort of my career trajectory. So, I really joined. I started in the travel business. My first job was working the front desk at a Days Inn hotel in Southern California.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it was some years ago.
Wait, so how did you end up in Southern California? I know you. I can obviously tell from your accent you're South African.
Yes, good. Yeah. I'm South African. Yeah. So so let me go back even further then. So I was born in South Africa. I lived in South Africa till the age of 12.
Okay.
And then from there I moved to France. So what happened is my parents were divorced. My mother met a Frenchman. They fell in love, and we moved to France. So I lived in France for 5 years. I went from having a pretty insulated life in South Africa. I moved to France. I went to a French boarding school, which was quite challenging because, I didn't speak a word of French, and I was thrown into this French boarding school. So I found the first 6 months to be a huge challenge. But I end up loving it, and it was a great experience for me. And I think for me, the biggest takeaway and the best experience I had with my education in France was that the school was so diverse and multicultural. So it was, I would say, close to half of the student body were foreigners. We had a lot of people from that came to the boarding school from Lebanon, because there was a civil war in Lebanon, so a lot of Lebanese came. We had a lot of Iranians. We had people my best friend was from Mexico. A lot of students came from the Ivory Coast, which was a former French-speaking colony. So that was just, for me, was fantastic, because I had come from a very insulated. My school in South Africa, it was an all-white school. It was still under the apartheid regime. So it was just a really incredible cultural change for me, and one that was sort of very enriching, and something I think that has really helped me during my career, because obviously now there's such a diverse workforce, and I think it's easy for me to relate to people from all different cultures and backgrounds. So that was really, really fantastic. So I finished up my education, my high school education in France, and I moved to the US, and I went to an American university. And then after I graduated, I didn't have a green card, and I was kind of looking around, and so I sort of fell upon the hotel industry, and I moved to Southern California because I joined a hotel management company at the time that was expanding very quickly, and they were looking for young people to join the group. And the idea was for me to go through a management training program, but it didn't quite work out that way. I just kind of got stuck at the front desk, and from there I progressed my career. I became a front desk manager, a night manager, assistant general manager, and then I finally ended up as a VP of operations for a group of 12 hotels in the Orlando area. And that's kind of where my sort of strictly hotel career came to an end, because I then joined the Travel Corporation. And my first job was working as, I was the president of the Travel Corporation division in Canada. I was there for 6 years. Then I moved to Uniworld for 10 years. Then I went to my chief engagement officer position in New York when we opened up the office in New York. And I did that for, I think it was about 4 years. And then just more recently, I've joined Insight and Luxury Gold. So that's my life and career in what, 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, well, you've seemed to lived almost both coasts in the U.S., Toronto in Canada, South Africa, France. It seems like you've definitely got a taste of the world just by moving around and spending time in different places during your career.
I have, and an amazingly rewarding experience. I really enjoyed it. I feel very lucky and privileged to have had all those opportunities to, live in different places, meet different people, have different work experiences. I mean, that's the one great thing I have to say about my career at the Travel Corporation. Even though I've been with essentially one company my whole career,
Yeah.
I have had the privilege and opportunity to work in different divisions, different countries, different cities, different states. So it's been a really rewarding career, I
Are there
think.
any places, I mean, I know you just mentioned you're in the New York area and you bought property, so I imagine that's the plan to stay there. But I mean, you have to have some favorite places you've lived or been throughout your career. And I know because it seems like such a diverse selection of places.
I've lived in some like wonderful metropolitan areas. I've also lived in during my hotel career, my first general manager position was a hotel in Bakersfield, California. So I've kind of really run the spectrum. I've lived in
Yeah.
Chula Vista, down in Southern California. But one thing I always say is that in terms of a lifestyle, of a great place to live, I spend quite a bit of time in Southern California, and that's just an amazing place to live, just because of the weather alone. I mean, the weather's just
Yeah.
really amazing, and it's such a beautiful state. But I think it's everything is what you make of it. I mean, we now live. I mean, I love living in France. I mean, South Africa is a beautiful place to live. I mean, it has its challenges for sure, but it's an incredible country. Also, stunningly beautiful. But it's what you make of it. I mean, we're now in the New York area. We love it. My kids, go to great public schools here. So I think it's a little bit what you make of it. I seem to adapt quite easily to different places that I live in. I didn't love some of the places I lived in, but made the best of it. Certainly our last three places we've lived are great metropolitan areas. It was Los Angeles, then to Toronto, and now to the New York area, and all those are just fantastic
Yeah.
places to live. Just so much to do, so much for the kids to do great cultural experiences. So yes, I've had a lot of great places that I've lived in, and all of them have their pluses and minuses. But I think just for the weather alone, I think Southern California
Yeah.
stands out in my mind, especially as you can appreciate we're now
Yeah.
entering our winter phase on the
Oh
East
my.
Coast, and it's a little bit cool at the moment. So
Yeah, it's funny because I mean I've been in New York most of my life. I've spent like I was in London for a little bit, and I went to university in Boston. Yeah, I mean every fall I always think about how lucky I am to live in New York because the city is great in the fall, but then like this week particularly, it's felt like you've almost starting to prepare for battle for the winter because you can tell it's coming, and the cold weather and the snow is all it just sort of changes your attitude pretty quickly.
no, totally. But
Yeah.
I will say that I moved to Toronto from Florida, so that was a major weather change. But again, I mean, I love Toronto. It's
Yeah.
such a metropolitan city. I mean, it's got great cultural experiences, great restaurants. So I put the weather aside, and you kind of adjust to it. You buy a big warm coat, and you kind of get on with things.
Yeah,
So yeah,
exactly.
I
Yeah.
mean, I've been
Um
lucky. I have lived in some great places, I have to say.
I mean, since you've spent so long in the industry, I'm curious. I mean, how have you seen the industry change over your career? I know that's a big question, but I mean, in general, have consumers sort of trended in a certain way? Because I know people talk about, especially the pandemic, people used to speak about how things are going to fundamentally change, and I don't know if necessarily things can fundamentally change in 18 months or so, but they certainly can in 20 plus years in the industry.
Yeah, no, I've seen a lot of changes. When I look, particularly at my career at the Travel Corporation, I mean, a few trends certainly stick out in my mind that I've observed over the years. One is certainly the growth of cruising,
Yeah.
and within that, I would talk more specifically about river cruising. And when I joined Uniworld, it was in 2006. I knew that it was going to be something special because when I was in Toronto, we were actually selling, Uniworld cruises because the Travel Corporation bought Uniworld in 2004. So
Gotcha.
for 2 years in Toronto, and I could hear in the call center like all these additional requests coming about
Yeah.
around river cruising and just this interest in river cruising. So for my 10 years between 2006 and 2016, I mean, the explosion was just phenomenal. So cruising in general, river cruising, I mean, just the growth of that segment has been really, really amazing.
Yeah, I even because I got in the industry probably 2015, and I guess my introduction to river cruising was seeing commercials for Viking on television. Like they seem to have taken the baton for that industry for marketing wise, and I remember just seeing those images and being like, how what an interesting way. And I've had this conversation with Ellen at Uniworld, and I think Kristen Kars, her and I spoke about this too. But it sort of takes you back when you realize you could see the world that way.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you mentioned Viking, and Viking was really instrumental in creating a lot of consumer awareness of around river cruising. But what I found when I was at Uniworld, I mean, it was such a great experience. But the Uniworld product was so amazing that we had, whereas I think, Viking was introducing a lot of new to cruise, but I mean, we had a lot of repeat cruises. So yeah, I mean, the company did grow substantially as did Viking, and it was it was really a great fun time to be in river cruising because it just grew so amazingly well. It was just amazing. And then the other thing as you say, I think the crux of your question was whether consumer tastes have changed and kind of how that's evolved. I mean, the one thing that I will say we've done with all the TTC brands, but I think it's particularly noticeable on the guided, the touring side, has really been this whole idea around being more immersive experiences. And I really do give a strong shout out to Trafalgar, which I think under the leadership of Gavin Tolman, I think he identified some years ago the need to have these more immersive experiences, and they launched what they called this Be My Guest program, where you actually went into locals' homes or you went to visit a local's vineyard and had a meal with the owner, understood kind of what the history is and what life was in that particular destination. And I think that concept has really evolved. I mean, certainly Insight has also started off, well, does offer a lot of different immersive experiences. So I think that whole thing about really getting into the understanding truly the destination and kind of experience it from a local perspective, I think has really grown within the guidification sector. I think is something that's very important to travelers today, versus, yes, we still do all the main sites and highlights, but having a meal with somebody in their home and having them sort of recount what life is in that city or village, I think is a very powerful experience for our guests. So that's certainly something we've seen on the guidification side.
Yeah, it seems like the world, I mean, just going off of that, it seems like the world has definitely gotten smaller and people are running out of places, I mean, to visit. Like you mentioned France, and I imagine on your third or fourth trip to Paris, seeing going to the top of the Eiffel Tower or going to the Louvre, it gets old, and you want to experience something a little, what you mentioned, experiential and a little more immersive, and you want to get a feel for what is life like for the people around you.
Exactly. So we've got a lot of those experiences. But I will say for us, the next trend, which I think is coming, or it's here, is really about sustainability and having a positive impact on the communities. And I think we are starting to see that a lot more. The travel corporation, certainly we've been very active and I think progressive and at the forefront of the whole issue of sustainability and leaving a positive footprint in the places we visit through the Tread Right Foundation. But something that we've launched just more recently are our Make Travel Matter experiences. And this is where we design experiences that have a very positive impact on the communities that we visit. And we actually tie these experiences to one of the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. So it really, it's not just talk, it's a very substantive program. And we see that as being something that I think our guests are very interested in. Certainly the data we're seeing is that sustainability is becoming more and more important to travelers. And I think even more so to younger travelers. So we see this as a very important sort of consumer trend. But more importantly, we believe that it's very important for travel companies to take that approach. If we want to continue to be welcomed in the cities we visit, I think it's very important that we also show that we're willing to make a commitment to the local communities and the people that actually live in those cities and destinations we visit. So I think that's sort of a very important, I don't want to say it's an emerging trend because it's been around for several years. I mean, the discussion around over tourism has been around for a while, but certainly, operators such as ourselves taking that sort of approach is very important. I will say one thing I'm very proud about is that both Insight and Luxury Gold, on every single itinerary in 2022, we have at least one Make Travel Matter experience on every single departure. So, we take it very seriously, and I think it's something that our guests appreciate as well. So I think it's a win-win. It's a win-win for our guests. It's a win-win for us because I think we're doing the right thing, and certainly for the local communities, I think it's very important.
Yeah, I had sort of a reckoning moment with that. You might have been there, but I attended a Tourism Cares event at the Harlem Theater in at the Apollo Theater in Harlem in New York City, and it was just highlighting how much good travel can do in terms of sustainability and improving the lives of local people. And it's funny, the over tourism debate was there pre-COVID almost everywhere, and now it seems to have disappeared, and I'm sure it'll be coming back soon. But I mean,
But sorry, the one thing I do want to highlight is that,
yeah.
as much as there was all that discussion around over tourism, I think what's happened during the pandemic is a lot of these cities now, obviously, it crystallized how important tourism is to the local economy. I think that's been one of the great benefits, is that these communities have woken up and said, yeah, I mean, we need to manage the tourism responsibly, but at the end of the day, it is super important to the local community, and I think everyone's eager. Well, I don't think, I know that cities and destinations are very eager to start welcoming tourists back. So
Yeah.
I think that was really beneficial for, I guess, governments to really understand the importance of tourism to the local economy. And so I think going forward, we just need to work with local governments to make sure that we're operating responsibly, and we obviously are not having a negative impact on the local population.
What would be the argument against? I mean, I know the TTC's dedication with Tread is above and beyond probably most other travel companies, but why would a travel company opt not to sort of dedicate resources to preserving or sustainability or environmental things like that? Because I mean, it just seems like this industry in particular is going to have to be stewards of that movement going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, possibly it's a financial issue because we do put significant resources towards our Tread Right Foundation. So we don't accept any outside donations. So this is all self-funded. So
Okay.
every one of the travel corporation companies have to contribute to the Tread Right Foundation, and that helps fund a number of projects that we've invested in. So there's over 50 projects that we've invested in worldwide, and so that does take resources. Even doing something as with our Make Travel Matter experiences, I mean, that requires us going out and finding these local communities or homes that we can take our guests to. I mean, it requires a lot of product development resources to do these things. So in some cases, it might be a resource issue, but
Do you look at that do you look at getting a return on that, or is it resources that you dedicate just because of the passion that you and the team at TTC feel for this kind of thing?
it's first and foremost a passion.
Okay.
And I really put that down to Brett Tolman, our CEO. He has a huge amount of commitment and passion to making sure that we, as we like to say, we tread right. So the Tread Right Foundation was founded, I think it's been 12 years now, and it was absolutely on the basis of Brett wanting to make sure that we preserve the places that we visit and that we give back to local communities. Are we seeing, is it helping us like commercially? It's really hard to say. I mean, we do hear that people are interested in sustainable travel. They, on the surface, say that it's important that companies do have a sustainable strategy. I'm sure it is helping, convert a few guests to the travel corporation. I'm sure that's happening, but that's not the reason why we're doing it. It really is to have a positive contribution on the local communities. And I mean, we really hope and encourage everyone in the travel industry to take a similar approach, because I think it is really important. I think the day that Venice wakes up and says, we don't want to welcome tourists anymore, it's going to be a sad day for all of us. So I think it does take a combined effort. And I think more companies are starting to pay more attention to sustainability. And I think hopefully it continues in that direction, because I think ultimately it's important for all of us.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, there's a number of companies, including TTC, that are just doing incredible things, and I feel like if the whole industry sort of joined, it would make a big difference. And hopefully, I mean, hopefully again, I hopefully when COVID sort of in the rearview mirror, maybe that becomes what's at the forefront.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I really hope so, and I think I really do hope more companies sign on and make a bigger commitment. And I have to say, I'm really so proud. I mean, another benefit of our sustainability efforts. Hopefully, there's a benefit that the consumers see. At the executive level, it's very important, but our own employees, and again, we have a lot of younger employees, and as I said before, I think sustainability for younger people plays an even more important role than maybe some of us on the older age spectrum. And so, our employees, I think one of the reasons why they're very proud to work at the Travel Corporation is because of everything we do for local communities. And it's not just in places we travel, we also do things here in the US. So I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of our employees choose to work here and stay at the Travel Corporation.
Yeah. So speaking of the U.S., I read a post you put on LinkedIn, I guess maybe more than a year ago, but about where you were anxious to travel to. Now that I guess the absence of travel, everyone was sort of figuring out what's next and where they want to return to. And you mentioned Ireland, the USA, and South Africa. And I'm curious if you got to any. I mean, I'm sure you live in the U.S., but have you gotten to Ireland or South Africa or any of those destinations in the U.S. yet?
I have not traveled internationally. Well, the interesting thing is, Dan, quick story is that when I was in Italy with the family towards the end of February
Oh wow.
of 2020. We were traveling around. I mean, there was there was no sign of COVID. I mean, we were in Rome, by the way. And,
Were there any did you hear any rumblings from the Italians or the locals, anything?
no, not
No.
really. I mean, this was like it was mid to. I think we ended up coming back like around February 22nd or something. But no, I mean, nothing. The restaurants are open. People walking around, no masks. I mean, I was watching. I was watching. I have an app on my iPad. I was watching. U.S. news. There's no talk about this huge the huge number of cases that were going to be reported. I mean, it was in northern Italy, so it wasn't Rome. But anyway, so I was going about my business. We flew back. I remember it was a Sunday. I landed Sunday, got home, turned on the TV, and there was all this talk about
Oh my God.
northern Italy and the pandemic and all the COVID cases. I decided to self-isolate, and I've been kind of working from home ever since. So no, I have not yet traveled internationally, but I have done a few trips domestically, more for work. I've been to a couple of conferences. I went out to California to our office in California, but I have not done a lot of travel. The next trip we're planning on doing is going to be to Canada in December to see my in-laws. But otherwise, that'll be my first international trip. But I do plan on, I think, what they call this revenge travel.
Yeah.
So I do have big plans for 2022, and certainly South Africa and Ireland are definitely on my list for 2022 still. So I hope to make it there in 2022.
Yeah, that term revenge travels, I don't know how great that is for it seems like it seems like a darker term than it
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
is. Yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, I'm definitely I spoke to Sherwin from African Travel, which is another TTC brand, and he sort of talked me into putting South Africa on my bucket list
Oh,
just because of how diverse it is and how many different experiences you can have in just one country.
I will tell you, obviously I speak to a lot of advisors, agency owners, and when I talk to like top producing advisors or agency owners, and I ask them, what's the best trip you've ever taken? I will say that most times if they've traveled to Africa, they'll say Africa. It's just such a once in a lifetime trip. I mean, you can go back many times, but it's just such an amazing experience. Going on safari, Cape Town, if you go to South Africa, is just a beautiful, beautiful city. So yes, I would totally agree with Sherwin that it is something you should definitely put on your bucket list and hopefully get there sooner rather than later.
I completely I completely agree. So I guess I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I do want to ask you a couple last questions just while we have each other. I know, so you've been in the industry for long, and I've asked a lot of executives who have sort of a similar length in the industry as you. If you had any advice for your younger self, or if any lessons you've learned that you wish you knew when you were sort of starting out in travel, what are they, and what sort of how would they you think have benefited you when you were younger?
So it's interesting because I actually was I did a presentation to a local university to their travel. Well, I was a speaker at for their travel class, and the two things stick out in my mind. One is the importance of networking. I can't state that enough. If I look back on my career, I wish I would have done a bit more networking because you just never know when that's going to be needed, and I look at people that are applying for jobs. I mean, just this past week, I had an advisor that I work quite closely with that's looking to make a career change, wants to get onto the supply side of the business, reached out to me, and we had a good relationship. He was very supportive of the brands that I've run during my career and asked if I'd act as a reference. I don't know if my reference is going to make a difference, but I just think having a network of people you can rely on when you need to look for a job or when you need advice, I think is just super important. And you need to stay in touch with these people because you don't want to just be reaching out when you have a favor, you need something. So whether young people start on making connection on LinkedIn or trying to go to conferences and just networking with managers and executives, I think is super, super important. The other thing I love to say about travel, or the hospitality industry, which I find so amazing, which I appreciate so much, is that there's, for somebody who's willing to work hard and apply themselves, there is great opportunities. I think when you look, for example, particularly in the hospitality industry, I mean, how many general managers or VPs have come through the hotel business, starting out as a concierge or a bellman. I just love those stories. I mean, I myself started at the front desk, so I just think for somebody who's willing to work hard and apply themselves, I think there's great opportunity in the travel industry. And so I would certainly, encourage people that aren't quite sure where they need to be or want to be, that the travel industry is a great place to start. And I'd also suggest that, on the advisor side,
Mm-hmm.
I think now is a great time to be looking at the travel industry because I do think clients are going to really be looking for more and more advice and reassurances as we kind of navigate our way through the pandemic. So I do think that there's a great opportunity right now for advisors to really become very successful. And then one last word of advice, which I don't know if it's particularly around career advice, but the one thing that I say is so important is at a very young age to start saving and planning for your future in the long term. I think when you're young, you don't really think about those things. But there's nothing more powerful than investing early because obviously with compounded interest, etc., if you've got a long horizon for your money to grow, is very important. So you can feel a lot more comfortable as you get close to retirement or at an older age. So those are some of the advice I'd have for young people entering the industry.
Yeah, you actually told me those the last part of your advice. You told me that a few years ago. I still remember it. I
Did you
took it
take
to
my
heart too.
advice though?
Yeah,
Did
I
you
took
take
your
my
advice. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm definitely following it to the day too. So you've made an impact on me at least.
Oh, good. Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad. No, because I remember, when as I said before, my first job, I started. I think I was earning $4.25 an hour, and obviously, when you're in that type of money, it's like almost impossible to say. But even if you just make like 5 or 10 cents, just to get into that habit of putting money away every paycheck, it's just such an important. And I'm doing my best to sort of instill that in my children. I think it's just really important, just to have peace of mind when in the long term and when you get closer to retirement. So good. I'm glad you took my advice. That's good. Okay, good.
All right. Well, again, thanks for your time, guy. It always is a pleasure to speak with you. And hopefully, I'm sure I'll bump into you very soon in the future. All these conferences coming up, relatively soon.
I look forward to it. It's really good to see you on camera. I hope to see you in person soon, Dan. And always a pleasure to talk to you. So thank you very much for your time too.
All right. I'm sure we'll talk soon. And otherwise, enjoy Toronto when you finally get to travel internationally.
Thanks. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks
All
so
right.
much.
All right.
Take care. Huh? Cheers.
ba-da-ba-da.